And I'm Mariana.
And this is She's Fruitful. We're a faith-based podcast to talk about all things Jesus, insights, and advice that we have.
Today we're going to be talking about the I don't care mentality we typically see in today's society and how it affects our relationships and our mindsets and everything else around us.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this because we live in a world that doesn't care, and Jesus teaches the exact opposite of that. So I'm excited to dive in. And we just want to thank you guys so much for your generosity. We are so excited for this Thanksgiving food drive. We just announced it officially on our Instagram and on YouTube. So please go check out that video. We will link it in the description below. And we're just doing something for families in our communities who struggle putting food on their plates, especially during the holiday season. So it's a way to bless them and to be able to show the love of Jesus in our communities. You can donate by clicking the link in the description, as well as a QR code that's going to pop on the screen. And again, any donation is going to be so impactful and powerful to these families and to our communities.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk about this too because I feel like it's it's happening more and more. Like, this mindset is more common nowadays than I think ever before, because there's also like so much to do, like so many distractions, so many things to think about, and it kind of makes us stray away from the things that actually matter, that should actually be driving us and comforting us and motivating us, and like how we treat people. So
yeah, it becomes inconvenient for people. Like, people just they either feel like people feel like they don't have the time to, or they have to go out of their way to, and they have so much stuff going on. But that's like that whole me mentality. Like, you try to get further ahead. You worry about yourself. You do what you have to do, and don't worry about what other people are going through. And that's the mentality, especially in the hustle culture. And I see that like when I was living in Miami. I think this is not even just Miami. I think it's in all kinds of cities where everybody is like just on their own schedule, just thinking about themselves, because obviously there's so many people there. But like, even in car accidents, like I've heard like people just like literally just step over them, and like, okay, like that sucks for that person, but they have to like continue with their day. And it's really sad because, again, Jesus teaches us the exact opposite of that, to love and show compassion even when it is inconvenient, even when it is challenging, and it's not like the best thing that you want to, like, it's not the thing that you want to do at that moment, right?
yeah, and I feel like it's also because we're so spoiled too, like especially here in like America, like we're so spoiled. Like, you see the way people have these massive portions even with food, and they're just throwing it away, and now we don't even want to take leftovers home, and like just like the way we kind of like overindulge, so it desensitizes us. I feel like that's the word. Like, we're so caught up in exactly what you're saying, like in ourselves and what we want and how we feel, that we don't care if we're wasteful. We don't care if we're neglecting our family. We don't care if we're not spending time with the Lord and taking care of our soul, because we're so focused on like what's happening now. So that kind of brings me to our first question. Gabby, why do you think society often promotes a don't care attitude, and how does this affect personal and community values?
Okay.
Repeat the question.
It's like, can you repeat that one more time? Okay, well, the first thing I think of is back in Genesis when Adam and Eve ate the apple, and their vision or their eyesight went from God to self. So now that they weren't looking at God anymore, they were looking at their self. So they become more selfish. They became more like, oh, don't look at me. Like, now they're afraid, and they're doing, they're like looking more at themselves than other people and than God. And I think in this society, especially in America, it promotes my truth and my opinion, and your opinion's over there. Like, you do whatever you want. I'm going to do whatever I want, what I think is true. And again, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And I think that affects our values in a way, one, because that doesn't align with our biblical values, with the Bible. And in our community, we are not helping others that are in need. I love that quote that says, when you feel helpless, become helpful. And so when you're just helping yourself, again, I feel like you're kind of just leading yourself into destruction and in isolation. And I think that even though America has, more ways to communicate with other people, we have become a country where we feel most isolated because that mindset. I think also, like, God's values are defined by a lot of things. We see that in Galatians, but 3 of them is mercy, love, and compassion. And throughout scripture, you see that God has a heart for the brokenhearted. He has a heart for those who are in pain, who are who are hurting, who are lost, and those who are in need. And then we see Jesus with his whole life. He literally was here to serve other people, to help other people. He wanted to help those who were in need and pain, who were overlooked or misunderstood. His whole life was dedicated to that. And I think that will, one, also impact our mental health, because when it's all about you, you become very prideful. And there's something about pride that just damages your, I don't know, it's like your mental health. Like you become very, I feel like, on edge, and you feel like you have to defend yourself all the time. And like, I don't know, it's like, I don't know if that makes sense.
It's like chains on us.
Yeah,
exactly. And it weighs us down. I feel like that's exactly why it's always said that the enemy comes disguised as an angel of light, because it's much easier to be selfish.
Yeah.
Much easier. But at the end of the day, you're callousing yourself and you're making yourself hardened, and you're not able to see people's needs and have the heart for people. Like, I feel like now, because I used to be like this, where it didn't really hurt me if I saw someone homeless, if I saw someone lacking like material possessions or food on their table. Like, it wasn't really like that big of a deal for me, because I didn't give myself the time to actually think about what's happening. Like, why is our society in this position? Like, why don't I have a heart for people? Why don't I feel people's pain? And then over time, growing closer to Jesus, now it like deeply hurts me. And that's what drives me and us to go out into our communities and to love and to care about people. I think I even see it in friendships. Like, sometimes it's much easier to be shallow and just like, oh, I'm coming to you with a problem. Like, hey, like I'm going through this and experiencing this. And like our answer is like, oh, well, just, be happy. Just don't worry about it. Don't think about it.
Sucks.
Yeah, that sucks. But we're not actually sitting down like, hey, talk to me. Like, let's figure out the root, because loving people, it does take selflessness. That's why Jesus was the number one example for that. He spent time, and it wasn't about his feelings. He spent more time listening to people, healing people, caring for people than he did even worrying about if he was going to be able to eat. But thank goodness he's Jesus, and God got him.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, he didn't sit there and worry about what he was going through, because he trusted the Lord to provide for him. He trusted that what he was doing was for a greater impact. Like, the seeds we plant now are going to be there for generations to come. And I think we're finally seeing the effects of that hardened heart. Like, how we're raising our children, what's in the school systems, how we treat other people, how we treat our temples and our body. We're glorifying sin. We're glorifying unhealthy habits, because it's I don't care,
And
why not?
You hear that in music, like, screw him or screw her, like, get what you want, get money, get all these things, and it's like only about you. Don't think about the other person, screw them, basically. And you see that again in Miami. It's like a dog eat dog world. Like, I don't care if I screw you over. At the end, it's like I have to protect myself, and I have to, like, and yes, protect yourself, but like, don't do it in a way where you're gonna hurt the other person to get on, like, to get into a superior position over them,
Yeah. And it's not even like, yes, we're hurting that person, but I love this verse that God will not be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. At the end of the day, you are hurting yourself. The relationships you're going to have in your life is shallow. The kind of heart that you're going to have towards people is going to end up getting you compromised and you hurt. The way you're going to value your family, all of these things, like, we think, like, the devil disguises himself. We think that it's going to really lead us to prosperity and gain. We see America, and people are out here chasing and pursuing the American dream, but we are, in this year alone, we are in the most personal debt per person than ever before in history. Everybody's individual debt is higher than it's ever been, and it's because we want more, and like, we don't care enough, realizing that if what we do now, like, our children are going to have to pay later. How we treat our environment, our children are going to have to pay later, the generations to come. This whole debt thing, like, you realize now you're a slave to your debtor, and now you have to work, 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 work. And then what's the consequences of that? Feeling depressed, anxiety, worried if we're going to be able to afford all these bills, and we're digging ourselves into a hole, all because we didn't care enough, or because I want it now, you know?
Yeah, it's the law of reaping and sowing, or sowing and reaping.
Yeah. I always get it backwards too.
I'm like, you know what I'm talking about. I want to read the parable of the Good Samaritan. Because I think it really shows, it's really good about what, like, it really does pertain to what we're talking about. So it is in Luke chapter 10, verse 25 to 37. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this, and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. 'Look after him,' he said, 'and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have.' Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell in the hands of robbers?" The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." And from this parable, we learn 3 principles about loving our neighbor. 1, lack of love is often easily justified, even though it's never right. And 2, our neighbor is one of any race, any creed, or social background who is in need. And 3, love means that actions are to meet the person's need. Jesus emphasizes the genuine care for others is not defined by cultural backgrounds, who they are, what they do for a living. It is because they are a person that was created in the image of God. And the Samaritan's compassion is modeled after how God loves us. It's unconditional. No matter who you are, what you've done, you're hurting, you're in pain, let me go help you. And that is living out the nature of God. And the Samaritan, he did it even when it was inconvenient. It was costly. He had to pay to help him to the innkeeper and come back and reimburse any expenses. He did it when nobody else did. And this is a direct reflection of God's love. It is a reminder that we are his hands and feet of this world, showing that his love reaches beyond what is expected or what is popular.
I love that you brought up that story, because I'm also thinking about it and how the Samaritan, like, they were considered like half-breeds, Jews and Gentiles. They were the ones that were outcasted.
Yeah.
It's funny that Jesus used him as the one who showed mercy. And I feel like nowadays we do that. Same with, like, you know, Democrat and Republican, or this belief or this faction, this group. Yeah. And, like, we're not willing to help each other. Like, if just because you look a certain way or believe something that you believe, when that's the whole point. Loving people that are different, loving the differences, and that is going to shine a light. I've realized that when you are kind and you care, and especially when you're, you know, might not be in a good situation, you're almost like a mirror to somebody. Like, people will be able to see for themselves how they are allowing differences to separate them, differences to harden them, difference to make them not care about people deeply. Because at the end of the day, like, we're in this race. We're all human.
Yeah.
You know, we're here to help each other and encourage each other. You know, we see that in like, you know, when I always think about how movies portray like high school.
Yeah.
And the girls are like, you know, so catty. It's so funny. And it's like the best kind of relationships or the best kind of friends that we see are the ones who are willing to share their knowledge, share what they're good at, share everything about them, because we want to see other people grow. We want to see other people happy. We want to see other people like love. And it doesn't matter where you come from or what you look like or what you believe in. When you care, that is what God calls us to. That is being that reflection of Jesus. And I'm reminded of when James said, like, you show me your faith without deeds, and I'll show you my faith by my deeds, because faith without works is dead. And he went to talking about Abraham, how Abraham's faith and deeds came together and righteousness was credited to him. And later on in that same verse, it talks about what is it to say, oh, keep fed and keep warm, you know, but does nothing about their actual physical needs. Like, do you really care? That's like seeing someone on the side of the street freezing in the wintertime with no jacket, and you just pass by, or you're like, oh man, I hope that someone stops to give them a blanket.
That's a verse in the Bible too?
This one I just said, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I would elaborate it a little deeper. Sorry. You're like, that reminded me. Reads the same verse, and I'm like, yeah, like, you're not actually doing anything. If your faith, if finding Jesus doesn't impact you so hard that it changes you as a person, that you understand out of what you have received, freely you have been given, so freely you give. You love because first I loved you. That is what really drives us, to soften us, to not have that I don't care mentality, because I can't even begin to express the mindset that I had before I loved God. The way that I didn't care about people's feelings. I didn't care about what people, if I was a stumbling block to anybody. I didn't care what my words were doing. The mouth that I had was so unrighteous and impure and unloving and unkind. And it's true in James, it also talks about how, like, the tongue is like a small part, like the tongue is a small part of the body, but sets one's whole course on fire to hell. Just like the boat rudder is the tiniest part of the boat, but it steers the whole ship in whatever direction. Like, the tongue is so powerful, and when used improperly or without respect, it can really damage. It damages you, it damages your relationships and everything else. So it's like, don't fall into the trap. How sin ensnares us. It traps us. It keeps us captive, and it hurts us more than it's hurting anybody else, because that is how your reputation is going to be. That's what you're going to look like. And especially if you claim to love Jesus, if you claim to love God, and it even talks about that, I think, again in James, like, the one who claims to have like religion but does not keep a tight rein on their tongue, their religion is worthless. You know, the religion that God accepts is as pure and faultless as this, to look after like the orphans and the widows. Like, it should drive us to love. It should drive us to care. It should drive us to go that extra mile. There's a scene in The Chosen when the Romans like see them on the road that they're traveling on, and they make them carry all of their equipment, like their swords, all of their heavy stuff, and they make Jesus and all of the disciples carry it and lug it around. And when they get to the mark of where they're supposed to stop, Jesus kept going. He kept walking, and all the Romans were like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And the verse in scripture, he was modeling it in this scene, and it was, when someone asks you to go 1 mile, go 2. If someone asks you for your shirt, give them your jacket too. Like, go the extra mile. Love, make that impression, so then it opens the door to so many relationships and to so many opportunities to share the love that you have received from God.
I love that so much, because I actually have that written down as well, because I feel like Jesus teaches us the exact opposite of what we're supposed to do, because the easiest thing to do when somebody like does something like that, what they were doing to Jesus and the disciples, making them carry all their equipment, like the easiest reaction is to be angry, yell at them, curse at them. punch them, whatever the case may be. But Jesus keeps going, and he tells us to not act in a natural way, but act in a supernatural way, because we're supposed to model God's love. In a world that's all about me first, it's easy to see how caring about others sometimes feels so out of place. And we live in a culture that focuses so much on yourself, get ahead, don't worry about other people, kind of what we talked about earlier. But God calls us to do something But God calls us to something totally different. Jesus didn't just teach love for those who are easy to love. Like you said in that verse, it's Matthew chapter 5, verse 38 to 42. It says, "You have heard that it was said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist any evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you." And then it continues in Matthew chapter 5, verse 43 to 48, talking about loving your enemies. It says, "You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you only greet only your own people..." What? Okay.
Take a breath.
"And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." So we don't lash out. Me lashing out yesterday.
You don't lash out all the time.
No,
and when you do, repent. First, there's grace. This doesn't mean you're not always gonna.
It says, we don't lash out. We don't overcome evil with evil. We overcome evil with good. And it's so funny because I was just telling Ari how me and my sister, and anybody who has siblings knows how difficult it is to hold back your tongue from your sibling because, just things get you riled up. And we literally the conversation escalated into an argument, and we just ended up just yelling at each other. And afterwards we're like, I don't ever want to do that to you again. I never want to yell at you. I don't want that to happen. And first of all, it's draining. I am exhausted. My eyes were puffy from crying, and she was exhausted, and it was just not worth it. Why did we do that? There was no point of us arguing besides literally just trying to hurt each other. And we accomplished that. And then afterwards we were like, why did we do that? What was the point?
Yeah.
What was the reason? So whenever somebody's making you angry, whether it's your coworker, whether it's your friend, your sister, your dad, or anybody on the street, road rage or anything like that, or somebody that hurt you really badly or really betrays you and it's really hard for you to forgive them. For example, you see those cases of where, your brother or your son or your daughter, their life was taken away from them from somebody else. And I've seen cases where the father or the mother just forgives them. As believers in Jesus, we leave justice for the wrath of God. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 23, it says, "When they hurled insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly." And this is about Jesus who, when he was on the cross, instead of reacting the way we would have reacted, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do." And when we show compassion, especially when it is inconvenient or it doesn't make sense or it doesn't seem like the thing that you want to do in that moment, people take notice. This kind of care goes against what society expects, and it can make people stop and look at you and like, why are you different? What makes you so different? And it's because we care so much and we're modeling the love of God. And think about it, when you choose to listen, to help somebody out, or just to be kind when it's not normal or when they're being mean to you, it is extremely powerful. It points people back to the heart of God, showing them that it's a love that is so genuine and it is so selfless. So I encourage you to look for the little ways to go against the grain, whether it's reaching out to somebody who seems like they are alone, or offering help without expecting anything back, or just choosing kindness when it's easier not to. These actions speak loudly, and people will take notice because it is not common. Again, we talked about it earlier. It's like a dog-eat-dog world out there. Like, people don't care. Like, they really don't. So when you act in a way that is opposite from them, they're going to look at you and they're going to think, wow, you're different. What is that about you? I love that. It touches people in a way that nothing else could. It shows them that there is a love out there that is so genuine, that is so beautiful, that is so loving and selfless.
That reminded me of a verse in John that says, they'll know you're my disciple by the way that you love.
I love that.
Yeah, and it's so true. And when you were talking about you and your sister, like, yes, I also have a sister. And I know exactly how it is. Me and my sister get in fights because, like, you ever see those memes and it's like texting a little sister is like texting a man completely uninterested in you? And that actually used to cause problems in our relationship because she's like, heart, heart, love, angel, butterfly, rainbow. And I'm like, good. Great. Yes. Sure. And then, like, I've realized that if I care about her, I'm going to care about what she cares about. Do I care to put the little extra emojis? No, but she does. And in order to show her love, I'm going to put a little bit extra effort, because what does that cost me at the end of the day? And we should be people who want to see people smile. We're called to be the light of the world and the salt of the earth. And we can't do that if we're like, oh, I don't really care about that. I don't really want to do that. Like, but I saw this one pastor and he was talking about marriage, and he was like saying how as a man he doesn't need validation, he doesn't need hugs, he doesn't need love and all these other things, but what he does need is respect and all of this stuff. And he's just like, I don't need that, but she does. I don't need this, but she does. And that's how we should treat one another. We should be looking at ways to love people the way that speaks to them, the way that they would appreciate, taking note. Actually, even things like remembering people's names. Me and my I'm gonna call her out because I can. My best friend does not remember anybody's name. She will meet them like 4 or 5 times and still not remember their name. And I'm like, girl, you have to at one point recognize that makes people feel bad when you can never remember their name.
Like the 4th time.
Yeah. It's like, hey, nice to meet you. It's like, we actually grew up together and had all classes together, and I was at your sister's wedding.
No, that's horrible.
But no,
It
we're all
happens,
gonna struggle
though.
with different things.
No, I struggled with that.
I struggled with it too. The thing that helped me to start remembering people's names is working at the church, because they were the ones that made it like click for me. Oh wow, that makes people feel important. That makes people feel special. That makes people feel loved. Remembering their name. Who knew? It's true. And that's what like gets me too. It's always in like the smallest things can make an impact. Like when you see someone struggling, open the door for them. When you like clean up your table for the server to just come pick it up. Like small little acts of kindness and love can make the biggest difference. And I feel like we get caught up in the doing, like how we get caught up in what it takes to do it rather than just doing it. And I feel like even you and I have done this with the podcast, you know, like we have to record and all this, we have to do notes, and we make it such a big thing. Or even the Bible study, like for instance, and it's just like when we get there, it's just about doing it, show up. Even the gym, you know, like we make it, I have to drive there, and
it's like Step in.
To put on my leggings, like all this stuff, like that's so really like small compared to just going out and getting it done, like Nike, just do it. And it's so true because it really does make people feel seen, heard, loved, valued, and appreciated. And that should be what we want. That should be the kind of person that we are. Something that I always stress is it has to be your character. It has to be who you are. You have to invite Jesus into your heart and allow him to purify you and move things around and prune you so it becomes who you are. It shouldn't have to be so draining to love people, so draining to talk to people and care for people. And if it is, there's a good chance that you have stuff to work on, or your eyes are on yourself rather than on serving others and loving others. It has to be your character so it comes easily to you. And God will work on you to where this comes natural to you. You will start just automatically serving people, automatically seeing things. Something that Pastor Jay said a long time ago that always has stuck with me. He's like, if you see a need, fill a need. And there's needs everywhere. Like so many things that could be done that really can help people and grow people, and honestly that can really point them to where they might need to be softened, where they might need to have an encounter with God, that their problem isn't with you, but it's with like their relationship with Jesus. The tension is between them and God, not them and you. And it's just like they won't have the opportunity if you are acting exactly like the world and not caring exactly like the world doesn't care. It's like we can see it so differently. And that's why it says work as if you're working for the Lord, not for man. Like work as if you're working for God, because when you love others, it is pleasing to God. Another verse in the Bible that I love so much that says they considered nothing was their own, but they shared everything that they had. When we start finding our value in things and material, they will become our life, and we will become ugly people just trying to defend it and keep our walls up to protect it.
Yeah, because we think that it's ours.
Yeah.
But that verse, it points you back to God, and it's like, no, this isn't mine. So I'm going to share it with other people and enjoy what God has given all of us, And that's why giving, even tithing, like your money is not yours. And we have to understand that, because that is something where I struggled in. It's like tithing. It's like, oh, I have to tithe, like, but I have bills to pay and I have all these things. And it's like so important to realize that this money is not ours. Every good and perfect gift is from God. And, the story with your sister, or even with what Pastor Jay said, if there is a need, fill the need, right? And it's that point that I said earlier, was their needs have to be met. With the Samaritan that was helping the person, he didn't just give him money to find a cab.
A donkey. No, it's so funny. Okay. I can't.
He didn't just ask him if he's okay and just maybe gave him a hug. No, he went and did the absolute most to make sure that he was okay, that he was safe, that he was protected, that he was looked after, and even was gonna come back to make sure that he was okay and reimburse the innkeeper for any extra expenses. And that is what we are called to do. When people are just stepping over the other person, when people are trying to avoid the problem, when they don't want to deal with it, we are called to deal with it, because other people's problems are our problems. I don't know why that's so hard for me to say.
It's like my arms.
In Galatians chapter 6 verse 2, it says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. How intimate is that? That for you to carry somebody else's burdens is for you to fulfill the law of Christ. The greatest commandment was to love God with all your mind, all your soul, with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as you love yourself. That is the great commandment.
Exactly. And, with tithing, I want to mention that because it's something that I didn't fully understand. It was like, why does God want my money? It's true. It's not my money, and it's not that God wants it, but I think there's two things. Number one is that money is one of the biggest competitors for our heart. And giving freely is what keeps our heart in check. And two, it's also with what the church does with the money. And I had this big debate a long time ago with like 8 people were like talking about tithing, and they were like, oh yeah, the church is corrupt, blah blah blah, this. And it was so perfect because I had just heard a sermon on this, and I was like, oh Lord, the way you work is so funny, divine appointment. And I got to express how it is not what they do with the money. You are doing your part. Even if they went and spent it on a Ferrari, that is between them and God. But your heart is in check. You are doing what you are called to do, and that is what matters. It's about our heart. And not to mention, that is the only time that God does say, test me in this. Test me in this. Fill my storehouse with the first 10%, and I will open the floodgates of heaven. Like, that is a wonderful and amazing promise. And it's also to get, like, to help us with our trust. Like, you can trust God. He is faithful. He will multiply anything that you give him. And I know we can probably do a whole episode on tithing, which I think would be a really great idea. But another thing that comes to my mind in this conversation is hookup culture, because we don't care about people. We do not care about what it's doing to their mind. We do not care about what it's doing to ourself. We do not care about what yoking ourselves with this person could potentially mean. Look at the rate of unwanted pregnancies or fatherless homes or things along those lines, because we just don't care. People are here to fill a hole that we have, and like the void in our hearts. And in reality, that void is there because it needs to be filled with something spiritual. Yeah. Only God can fill that void, and you will not be able to love others properly, consistently, if you are not filled by God. If you do not have that relationship with God, you will use people as a tool. You will use people to manipulate them and not appreciate them. People will be there just for you to take advantage of, or do whatever you have to do for you to wind up on top, and you take care of yourself. And it's like, and people will cover that with, sugarcoat that with the word like surviving. Like, I'm just trying to survive. I'm just doing what I gotta do. And in reality, it's like, no, it's, you are actually pointing out your lack of trust and dependency in God. Yeah. That is the only thing that you're doing. You're showing an area in your life that you do not trust the Lord with, and that there is brokenness here. Like, marriage and intimacy is such a sacred thing. It's a covenant that you get between a husband and a wife. And when you don't care, and like having relationships and having intimacy is meaningless to you, you will start to truly not care. Yeah. And it will really callous you and harden you.
Yeah, I think it makes you very insensitive. I've had many friends who were very involved in hookup culture, and you can tell that their hearts were so hardened. I was watching I think another podcast or a video, and she just brought up an amazing point where she was like, a lot of people say that they don't care, but when you put it in this perspective, for example, you go out with a guy for dinner and you go home with him, you sleep with him, and then the next day you're like, that was amazing, like, I hope he texts me back, all these things. He ghosts you. Versus when you go out with the guy, you go get dinner, but you don't go home with him and sleep with him, and he ghosts you. Which one is less painful? When you didn't sleep with him, because it was like he wasn't able to see that part of you, and he wasn't able to take advantage of you. He wasn't able to just use you as a tool. You had a boundary over the sacredness around marriage, the intimacy that comes with marriage. You protected that. You had a boundary over it. But when you give yourself to somebody who doesn't value you, I promise you it's going to be painful. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you say. It is going to hurt you. And if you don't feel that it's painful now, it's one, because you're numb to it, and two, later on it will be painful. And later on you will see the fruits of that.
Exactly. And I think what you said is so true. Like, we say we don't care, but in reality, I think we don't want to care.
Mm-hmm.
So we say that enough to where it actually starts to mean
Yeah, we
something.
believe a lie that's not true.
Exactly. And I feel like that happens so often with everything. Like, we say we don't care about the world around us or what's going on or that person, or maybe someone in your family hurt you and everybody's telling you to reconcile with them, but you're like, look, like, I just don't care. I just don't
Yeah.
care. No, you do, but hurt people hurt people. And if you are willing to say that you don't care about anything, that means you are probably just deeply hurt in that area. And caring isn't just being agreeable. Caring isn't just being someone that you're not in order to be liked or to look like a person who's loving. We
Mm-hmm.
know what really caring looks like. If you say you really care about a person, you're not going to barely spend time with them. You're not going to, when they tell you how they feel about something, you're not going to dismiss them. If they're talking to you about their feelings, you're not going to spend 20 minutes trying to tell them how their feelings are invalid and
Mm-hmm.
incorrect, because first, feelings are feelings. They're feelings. Most of the time, they don't really make sense. They can't really make sense. Sometimes they are very valid and they do make sense. But at the end of the day, no one can really control how they feel. Something just happened to make them feel that way. So
Mm-hmm.
for you to go and that is not caring. That is
Mm-hmm.
not that is not paying the attention that's deserved, especially when it's someone that you value, someone you want to keep in your life. If you want to get rid of that relationship, the best thing that you can do is always tell them how their feelings are invalid and how what they're saying doesn't matter and it doesn't make sense and that it's not worth touching on or getting frustrated by them. I think that's a sign when someone doesn't really care, is if they're really easily angered by your emotions. If they're really easily angered when you come to them and you want to resolve something or you just want to talk to someone about something and like they're getting frustrated with you, I think that's a sign that it's like this person probably might love you, but do they really know what love is? Do they really
Mm-hmm.
know what love looks like? Because we have the exact example of that in scripture. Because love is patient, love is kind, love does not boast, love does not envy, love keeps no record of wrong, love always hopes and trusts, perseveres. You know, that is what love looks like. And so the opposite of I don't care is loving. So if you're really going to love someone, and that's not a checklist of what you do. That is God's love towards us. And when you accept God's love and you allow it to change your heart, you will reflect God. You will reflect his character. Because at the end of the day, we are all made in the image of God. We're made to care. We're made to be relational. We're made to love people. We're actually made to look for the interests, consider other people greater than ourselves. That is the kind of people that God desires us to be, is to be fully selfless, fully humble. And I think the way that we get to this point, and if we have that I don't care mentality, it's really taking the time to understand and digest what had to be done in order to have you here today, in order to have the breath in your lungs and the mercy that has been given to you. If you really sit there and think about what has been done, you will start to care a whole lot, because we are so undeserving. The amount of times that I have rebelled and walked away from God, the only thing that wants truly pure intentions the best for me is our Creator, who has a plan and a purpose and who died for us. Like, when we really think about that, you will start to, anything anyone does will not matter. You can sit here and write me a whole text about how terrible I am, but it doesn't matter. You could like kick me while I'm down, whatever it is. It's not worth getting emotional over it. It's not worth letting it take our joy and take our peace, because we know what God did for us and he sees us. When you love when it's undeserved, like what you said earlier, what is it to love someone who already loves you? Or what reward should you get by receiving a beating that you deserve, but
Mm-hmm.
to endure something that you don't deserve? That is commendable before
Mm-hmm.
God. Like, yeah.
I want to touch on invalidating other people's feelings, because I always wondered why why, when you talk to somebody about your feelings and when they don't validate your feelings, why does that feel so horrible? And it's because it's a form of rejection. Like, they genuinely don't, like, they're rejecting your feelings. And it's like, no, this is how I feel. Like, what do you mean? Like,
And they're like, ugh.
yeah, it's like, literally, like, not literally. I'm trying to stop saying literally.
Yeah.
I'm like, literally. Okay. It's how I feel. And like you said, feelings just happen, and you should validate somebody's feelings even when you don't understand why they feel the way that they do, because you're like, I did nothing wrong, but obviously I did something wrong for them to feel that way. So validate their feelings. And because when you invalidate that person's feelings, it will make them, one, feel rejected, like I said, and two, they will start putting up a wall that they don't want to come to you, because you're just going to invalidate their feelings, and they're not going to feel protected. They're not going to feel safe. They're not going to feel like they can come to you. And that is the last thing that you want them to do, because you love and care for this person. But again, you need to make sure that their needs are met. And sometimes caring in a world that doesn't care can feel exhausting. Or when it comes to caring in a world that doesn't care, I feel like it builds resilience. It's easy to wonder, why should I care when nobody else is caring? Like, what difference am I gonna make? And what is that song? I'm gonna look it up. It's by Michael Jackson, I think. And it's called Mirror, I think it is. It's like, if you want to change the world, look at yourself in the mirror. And you have to start with yourself. You cannot look at somebody else and it's like, you have to change. It's like, no, I have to change in order to see change. It all starts with you, right? Each act of kindness, especially when it's tough, it strengthens our faith and shapes our character. People will look at you, even when people are indifferent towards you, even when it's inconvenient, that you will always represent the love of God. That they will look at you and they know, like you said earlier, that they know that you are a disciple because of how you love and how you treat other people.
I really love that word resilience, and I love that you brought it up. I was actually, funny enough, watching a sermon by Rick Warren. I love him, but at the end of it, he was saying how, you want to be a winner. You want to be a winner. You want to know what makes a winner compared to everybody else who is a loser. If you don't want to be a loser, he was really going in on it. And then he was like, there's one word to sum it all up, and it's resilience. The ones who fall and don't get back up, that's when you fail. But the ones who continue in it, to keep straining forward and pressing forward, who has their eyes set on the kingdom, has resilience. It doesn't matter how many times we're knocked down. We know our purpose. I'm not going to love you because you are nice to me. I'm loving you because I am commanded to love, and I love God. I honor and value God so much that I'm going to care for you, to care for your needs, to share the things that I have. And eventually, like I said, it becomes who you are, but that's what resilience is, continuing in it and not letting things of this world take your eyes off of the goal, not letting things of the world or circumstances or people or situations distract you from what the goal is. And our goal is to care and to love and to be children of God.
Yeah, and when we do this, we're developing a deeper character and becoming more like Christ. We're steady, we're compassionate, we're grounded, and no matter the circumstances. And I encourage you to reflect on times where you didn't want to show compassion, and when caring was difficult, but you felt the presence of the Lord, or you felt like you got stronger because of it. And the last thing I want to touch on is showing compassion and showing that you care leaves a legacy of kindness, because a lot of times people won't remember what you wore, what you looked like, what you said, but they will remember how good you made them feel, how much you made them feel like you cared and that they were important. Like you said earlier, every small act of kindness is like planting a seed. Even if we don't see it grow, we have impacted that person in such a powerful way. I remember, okay, this is getting a little deep, but when my brother had passed away, my best friend's mom, mind you, my best friend's mom and my mom don't speak the same language. My mom speaks Spanish, my friend's mom speaks English, and she's like a country bumpkin. She's so cute. but they don't speak the same language. And my mom literally could not get herself out of bed, and her and my best friend's mom would be over like washing dishes and making sure that the house was kept clean and like doing whatever she can. And literally when my brother's urn came in, my mom passed out. Like she like fainted, because imagine seeing your child in an urn, and she was there helping her, not knowing like the language, not knowing the words to say, but just knowing that your presence matters and showing that love and that compassion despite you crying. Me too. Like I want to tear up. But showing that love, no matter if you don't even know what to say or how to say it, like just giving that person that you can, like, or showing that person that you care, no matter how difficult it is to express that or to say that, you know? Or I encourage you to think of times where somebody like really impacted you in a way that you will never forget, and it was that act of kindness. It could have been something small, and it impacted you in such a powerful way. That person probably never knew how much you impacted them. The point I'm trying to make is that every choice to show love adds to your legacy of kindness, adds to a legacy that can inspire others to do the same thing, right? God uses those little moments to cause a ripple that goes way beyond us. I encourage you guys to think of one small way that you can add to your legacy each day, like saying a compliment and actually mean that compliment. Don't just lie to the person, say you like their shoes when you really don't like their shoes. Like actually mean it, because people can tell when you mean something, right? So, or lending a hand or being present or just the little things. Like I remember I went on a walk the other day, and normally people just say good morning, right? They just wave and say good morning. But there was this guy, he was like an older gentleman, and you can tell that he was like trying to be brave and say something more than just good morning, because they're like strangers, and strangers can be intimidating when you're saying hi to them, especially in the morning, because a lot of people are not morning people. But he was like, good morning, have a beautiful day. And I was like, I will. Like it was so sweet, because it's like nobody ever wants to go the extra mile or the extra sentence to put in that effort and say like, no, have an amazing day. Like it's just the little things that can brighten somebody's day. Like I remember that because I'm like, wow, that was so sweet. It can be very overwhelming to think that you have to do grand gestures and buy somebody a car, or I don't know, something crazy like car. It's like a nice gesture, you know?
I'll take one of those. That's funny.
And thinking about maybe it could be time consuming or all these things, but sometimes it is the smallest acts that are the most powerful. Like sending a quick message to a friend that probably you haven't heard in a while, and you're like, hey, how are you doing? Because it makes them feel important, that you still remember them, that you still care for them. Listening without any distractions. When somebody's like coming to you and like you just listen to them without your cell phone like going off, and you're like on your phone and just scrolling, like you're there listening to them. Even if you don't say anything back, it's like that you're listening, you're lending an ear, right? You're lending an ear for them, that they can just vent, and they see that you actually care because you're fully present in that moment. Or just simply struggling or simply just praying for somebody who is struggling. There has been many people that I have prayed for, and they just are crying because they have never had anybody pray for them. And I'm like, wow, like that is so beautiful, because I remember the first time I was prayed for, I started crying because it was so, I've never had that. Like I've never ever had that. These little actions don't take much, but they're so powerful, and they go beyond, like way beyond us, right? And honestly, encourage God to ask you, where can I show an act of kindness? What can I do for you, Lord, where I can represent who you are and your love? When we're intentional with the small things, we become a part of something bigger. God's work of spreading his love in a world that needs it.
And it's not because we have to, it's because we want to. That's our purpose. Like pushing people towards their purpose, helping people identify their purpose. I heard this. No!
That scared me so hard.
I heard this thing that says men are now like like getting more and more depressed because they're lacking purpose, especially because of like feminism. Like women are kind of taking like man's roles and not allowing them to fulfill their purpose and what they were designed and created for, and it's making people feel like they're lacking their purpose. But not just men, a lot of women, a lot of children, a lot of people have like a lack of purpose and they don't really know where their purpose is. But our purpose is to know God, be known by God, and to allow your testimony to shine like a light in this generation. And that is exactly what caring will do. I also think it needs to be said that when you are caring and loving out of a genuine, pure heart, this will not lead you into being a doormat. It will not lead you into being taken advantage of. God will guard you and protect you and reward you. Don't listen to the lie thinking that your work is in vain, your love is in vain, your caring heart is in vain, because it's absolutely not. And God sees you and he knows you and he loves you and he loves everybody who's a long way off. And you will be that vessel that God uses to leave the 99 for the one.
And we have a whole episode about boundaries, of like when to actually put up boundaries, because yes, we are called to carry each other's burdens, but there is a boundary there. And just to protect your own mind and your values as well, that this doesn't absolutely drain you, you know? So, and you're so spot on with the whole purpose thing. I think feminism and the songs and what people like women are saying about men and what men are saying about women, it distorts the purpose that we all have, because we can get into it. That's for another episode. But basically, it distorts your vision of what your purpose should be. And our purpose in this life is to be fishermen of men and to spread the good news across the globe, to love God with all your mind, all your soul, and all your strength, and to love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into this conversation and just being such faithful listeners and so supportive and so loving. We really do read everybody's comments, and it keeps us motivated. It keeps us here. Well, of course God does, but this is fellowship. This is our community, and we just love our Fruitful Fam, and we are praying for you guys, and I pray that the Lord blesses you and keeps all of you and continues to refine you and build us all up, because we are on this faith journey together and we are running this race, and I know in my heart that we will have such an impact in this world, and we really will be the hands and feet of Jesus. And so I'm so thankful for you guys. And if you enjoy watching our podcast, please be sure to like and subscribe. We would not be able to be here without you.
Yeah, I absolutely love reading the comments, because it makes me feel like people relate to us. Like they understand. Like we're not the only ones. Like especially in the last episode about our struggles. Like people, it made me feel so seen. I was like, I'm not the only one. Like we're all going through the same thing, So we just want to thank you again so much for your generosity. I want to remind you that we are doing a Thanksgiving food drive. We're partnering up with our local church, and it's going to be so beautiful and so impactful to the families who are struggling to put food on their tables for this holiday season. And don't forget that the last day to donate is going to be November 15, and you can donate by clicking the link in the description, as well as scanning the QR code that's going to pop on the screen. And any donation is going to be so impactful to the families who struggle during the holiday season.
Until next week.
Bye-bye.